to have you back with us on Curiosity, Not Judgment. Welcome. I'm Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So, had an interesting debate with my daughter a while ago about the concept of when do you do the cool stuff in life? When do you buy the fun stuff? When do you have the toys? When do you splurge? I think I grew up in the mindset of, well, you take care of business first. You take care of your responsibilities. You do some of the grunt work, and then you can play. But her argument was kind of, well, why would you save the best for last? Why would you want these things when you're old and feeble? I think were her words. And so I know that you've got a strong thought on this, and so let's jump into a dialogue on should you save the best for last?
Well, let me start with the little placard on at the end of it's one of those buffet lines, adult cafeteria lines in Texas, and it starts with the desserts.
Oh.
And the sign there says, "Eat dessert first. Life is tenuous." And it's funny because when we go on cruises, sometimes we'll say, "Bring the dessert first, just for fun." In The Road Less Traveled, Scott Peck talks about delayed gratification being the sign of maturity, which I hate because I don't want to be mature then. I would like to do it, if not all along the way, do it first and then reward myself with the hard work. Oh yeah, that's not the way it works either.
No.
I tell you, this one's a hard one for me because delayed gratification is difficult for me. I think that the stories are legendary of someone who works their butt off for the gold watch, so to speak, is showing my age, but for retirement, and has the savings for a fishing boat and a Winnebago, and boy, when I stop working, I am going to just travel the world. I'm going to fish. I'm going to relax. I'm going to ride around in my Winnebago, and they retire and they're dead in a year. That's just tragic, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, you can do things along the way, or you can, where I have to motivate myself to do the hard part, to do my Pomodoro. And for those of you who don't know about Pomodoros, please look it up. Not for this podcast, but the principle behind a Pomodoro comes from an Italian tomato name is you do something for 25 minutes, full on intense focus. And if you do that a couple times a day, then you'll rock the world. But in order for me to do a Pomodoro, I sometimes entice myself to do it by giving myself a reward afterwards. And I know this is the debate you're having with your daughter, and I'm different if I'm trying to have a teachable moment with a child than I am with my own self.
Sure.
Do as I say, not as I do. But I can say that I think it's a healthy debate, and it may be situational.
Sure.
Maybe there's times when you can do things enjoyable first and then the task. Sometimes you can do things along the way. But I think there's many times when you have to do the work first to reap the reward. I spoke last time about my favorite farm story. Well, you can't cram on the farm either. You can't wait till August and then expect to harvest in September. You do all the work in the spring. You till the soil. You do the planting all along. You do the weeding. And then you get the harvest.
Yeah.
That's nature. That's natural. The world tells us that delayed gratification is the way to go.
So I was thinking about this in a couple different categories, I suppose. I think what initially brought up the conversation is talking about her moving out. She wants to move out and started looking at apartments. And I don't know if you've seen rental prices on apartments.
I hear they're huge.
It's ridiculous. I mean, cockroach infested hole in the ground for $900 a month.
Wow.
And I was thinking to myself, why would you dump, $900+ a month into something like that when maybe there's opportunity to find a townhouse or a duplex or something that you could buy,
or a condo,
and be investing for, the long term. And her response was, well, maybe I'm not ready for the long term, and maybe I want the experience of the short term. And I couldn't really fault her. I couldn't argue with it because, she's not me. I bought a house I was 21, I think, and, we immediately moved into a house upon getting married, and I've been a homeowner ever since. And so, but the prices were much lower back then. We, were able to eke by on our very modest income while paying a mortgage. And I know that may not be the case anymore. So It's a really interesting debate to have.
If you listen to the people who study intergenerational and Gen X and Gen Y, et cetera, they will say that the younger the person, the younger the person, the less likely they are to want to buy a house right now. And that it's the gig economy, it's the just rent things that we would normally own. Everything from boats and Winnebagos to homes.
And furniture.
And
You can-
furniture.
Yeah.
You can rent anything these days. And there's pros and cons to all of that, of course. I will tell you that I'm a little bit concerned about a national trend right now called build to rent, where developers and builders used to come in and think about a master plan community, and they would build it for the purpose of selling the homes as quickly as they could. Now, people are building entire 1,000-home developments and only doing rentals. BlackRock, or I shouldn't say these people by name, I don't want to disparage anybody. There are companies that are going around and buying the home that you live in. They'll come to a block, a community, and they'll say, we'll pay you for you to now lease your own house back to you, and here's why that's a good thing for you.
It's like a reverse mortgage.
That's the thinking. If you believe a reverse mortgage is good, and sometimes it is if you're elderly and you've got a lot of equity in your home and you've got some medical bills, it's a good thing to do. The point, though, is you're not building equity. And to me, it is against intergenerational wealth. It's against the building up of equity and assets in your life. And again, I'm not curiosity, not judgment.
Right.
Is this a good thing or not a good thing? I was always taught, and when I was growing up, that you buy a house and you don't just throw your money away on rent. Now, here's another thing that's showing my age. The first time I went to go buy a house, interest rates were in the teens, 14 to 18%. We jumped on something when it went down to 12% or something, and that was our choice at the time. And we still thought that was a better deal than renting. So, the debate rages on. But here's the thing. If you are renting something versus owning something, do you value it as much? Do you improve it? Do you make equity investments? And if you're not doing that, how do you build equity? I could see the argument that if rent was cheaper than buying a house, and you took that incremental money and saved it or invested it towards the future, sure, makes a lot of sense, because houses are sometimes money pits. And it's great if the landlord has to fix stuff and you don't.
Yeah.
But long term, it's a good question.
Well, so as always, I want to, kind of redirect us towards the curious questions that we can ask. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's having this type of a dialogue with a young adult child, or conversely, if you've got an aging parent and you've got questions about what to do with property, et cetera. What are some of those curious questions we can ask around this space where we can make some good decisions, and everyone will not land on the same page just because of, circumstance and personality and everything else. But what are some of those curious questions we can ask about value, lifestyle, time of life, et cetera?
Well, I think you could start with, kind of the end in mind. What are my goals? How long do I think I'm going to live here? Do I think I'm going to relocate anytime soon out of this city? Do I think I'm going to get a job that would require an excessive commute? Do I think that home ownership is a value? Have I talked to an accountant or a trusted advisor about who knows a thing or two about money matters, and what would be the current recommendation, as you said, in the current time based on my personality? If you go to a money manager, even if you're just going to talk about buying stocks, they will get to know you. A good money manager will get to know you and see, do you have a high risk tolerance or a low risk tolerance? And if you have a high risk tolerance, you're going to be in high tech stocks that might be here one day and down here and up the next,
volatile.
and buying Bitcoin and all this other stuff. If not, you're going to be buying gold and silver and water rights and doing the indexes, right? And so I think all those things are good questions to ask if you're considering renting versus buying. I do think it's important to ask the questions, though. I think where we get dangerous is if we've just decided something with no data and without an analysis.
So, of course, home ownership, apartment living, all of those things are one particular category. I kind of teased up front about vacations as well, and that concept of traveling. And do you do it when you're young and fit? Do you save money? Do it when you're a little bit older and I'm going to say, paid your dues, your kids are grown? I was getting off a plane with my husband a couple days ago, and we were talking as we were walking through the airport, saying, you know what, we never traveled with infants, ever. I think the first time our children were ever on an airplane was maybe when they were 8 and 9 years old. A, we didn't have the budget for it, but B, like I didn't want to deal with that. As I'm watching young moms, carrying babies and strollers and car seats and all of that, it's like, oh, forget it. I don't want to deal with that in an airport. But I think there is a shift in cultural thinking right now about, hey, if you can travel, pack up the kid, let's go.
I do see that, and that my wife and I travel, every week, every other week, and we're seeing kids on almost every plane now, and it didn't used to be that way. It used to be you'd get dressed up and go on an airplane, right, in the old days. But even then, I remember when my kids, I think the youngest I ever put a kid on a plane was about 5 months. We had a conference in San Diego. My wife wanted to go, so we packed up our children and went. But I tell you what, we didn't have all the toys back then. You didn't have these super Inspector Gadget convertible strollers with detachable car seats that go in the plane. You just held your kid until they had their own seat, and then they sat in the seat. And we had very strict rules about traveling, right? And we would bring activities, make sure that they didn't get fussy. We'd try to plan it to where they were sleeping. Never kick the seat in front of you. Those kinds of things. And it's kind of funny. Now I think it's more like getting on a plane is just like walking down the street. You just whatever, and you go. And I think that's another interesting dynamic. But I distinctly remember a time when I was a teenager. And, this is back when the book Tenocracy was around, and, you read this book about where they were just euthanizing everybody over 30. And the teenagers ruled, and I was thinking, yeah. And, of course, at the end of the book, the people who are running everything turn 29, and they all of a sudden rethink what they're doing.
Rethink that plan, yeah.
But I remember watching an elderly gentleman speeding down the road in a Corvette going, what a waste. And now I am that guy, right?
You are the elderly gentleman.
But I don't feel old, right? I thankfully I don't look in the mirror very often. But the point is, I feel like I'm a kid, right? Put me in a sports car and I'm happy, right? And I'm as happy now as I was then. I used to think how ironic that I can't afford the toys that would be so much fun when I was a teenager until I'm old, and isn't that wasted on the old, and there's all kinds of sayings around that. But I would say that people are on their own journey. And the thing to do is to ask the questions about, do I want to wait until I do X? And that's, buy a car and, thinking about goals and financial situations, go on a vacation, etc. I happen to believe that traveling adds a lot to your life as far as cultural perspective and meeting new people and getting out of your own circles and meeting people from other tribes. But that's just me. If you're not one of those people and you're an introvert, and even if you traveled, you wouldn't talk to another soul, right? Well, then that's a different story.
Yeah. This is a category that for me is a little bit hard to step out of the judgment place because it's been so ingrained in me, that principle of, wise investing, work first, take care of the responsibilities first. And so when my kids have a very different opinion on how they want to live life, it's really difficult for me to step back and be curious, because I think just there was such a cultural expectation for several generations that now has shifted pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, but again, there is a spectrum, right? I think you're right that the mean has shifted, but there's always a spectrum of people, and kids often do opposite their parents. And more than one sibling in the house is going to be different, as we all know if you've had kids, which is sometimes amazing that they grew up in the same house. So you're going to talk about. There's going to be dinner time conversation where you and your husband have been talking about these things, and the kids are listening, and they either choose to adopt that or they choose not to. Sometimes you really don't have a choice. That's kind of where your framework comes from. Even if you think you want to do something different, you'll kind of get gravitated back. But I will say this. It's very difficult to control someone into doing something, as we've talked about before. And the best way to help someone think through something is to ask them questions and to teach them how to question.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in this whole realm that we're in now of just it not being the way it was when we were that age, and I'm sure that applies in every single
Every
generation.
since mankind.
The exception at this point, and perhaps the exception, is now being able to pay your way through college. There, I think, was a shift, a point in time shift. If you were staying local and going to a state school, there was opportunity to go to work and to save enough money or to earn enough money that you could pay your way through school as you were going. Tuitions now have gone so high that it is nearly impossible to do that with most state institutions. Because when I'm just using an example for us locally here in Albuquerque, I was a student at University of New Mexico. I want to say the tuition per semester was somewhere in the ballpark of $2,500. It was in the realm that I could earn enough money, go to school, pay my school dues, and graduate debt-free. Now there is an absolute expectation that unless there's been some sort of a scholarship or a debt forgiveness program, that by and large, you are absolutely going to leave school with debt. And I heard this morning that college debt has overtaken credit card debt, and college debt on the books is somewhere in the area of $1.8 trillion. And so these are just mind-boggling things. And I think there has been shifts in affordability, availability to do some of the things that prior generations could do.
So I won't get into if college should be that expensive, because I think that's a fair question.
Well, it's another topic altogether.
And it's another topic altogether. I don't know that college on a percentage basis is more expensive than in the past. I have heard other people say that. I will also say that both my wife and I, when we both graduated college, had debt. We did both try to work our way through. Neither one of us got significant help from our parents and had significant debt. When I went in the military, I got that deferred for a while. We were paying off debt, though, into our 30s. And it was part of our monthly budget, and we wouldn't even have thought to ask for forgiveness of that. I think that's a current interesting movement that I have questions about. But I would say, if that's true, that it is a significant change in how expensive it is and how much debt kids are getting out of college with by choice or otherwise, then I think that should be backed up into being intentional about, just like whether you rent or buy a house, whether you should go to college. And I think what degree you pick within that too. If you're going to college and you're going to get out and your average salary in that profession is, let's just pick a number, $50,000, and you're going to a college that's $50,000 a year,
Good luck paying that down.
is that a wise choice?
Yeah.
What are your resources? Can you get help from your parents? Are there other things you can do? Can you defray some of that debt somehow? I think I will say this, it has gotten way easier to get a college loan than certainly when I went to school. It was a difficult option when I went to school. Now, almost like, they send you credit cards when you turn 18. I think financial advisement is as important as college advisement in the high school and senior year realm.
Yeah.
And I would say that we have, as a society, have bought into the fact that you will take out college loans even if you don't need them, and just have a better quality of life. Now, I have a grandson who's at UNM right now, and we call it University of Near Mom. And he's paying his own way. Now, I think he got the presidential scholarship because of grades or SAT or something. But he's paying his own way. Now he's working. He's got an internship. And I don't think he's going to graduate with any debt.
Yeah, because the lottery scholarship is something in New Mexico that
For the first year only, right?
No, it's all 4 years.
Oh, that's right. You get a bridge loan the
Yeah,
first year.
right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's there are workarounds to be sure. But let's make the assumption for a moment that you are, anticipating $20,000 worth of student debt upon your graduation. Do you still go on vacation? I mean, I think this gets back to that gratification.
During college, you mean?
Or even immediately after. Let's say you've earned your degree and you think, man, this is the time that I now have earned my cruise, and what's another $3,000 for me to add to the pile, right? And so I think that's where speaking of myself, were I to have that conversation with somebody of that mindset, I would have to really try hard to be curious, because that goal, that teaching, that philosophy that I was so enmeshed in my whole life is you pay off your debts as quickly as possible. And no, you don't go on vacation. You pay off your loans. And, the argument, I could already hear it right now, be, well, there's no better time to travel than right now. I'm young, I'm healthy, I've earned it after getting my college degree. And why would I put this off until I'm 60?
I think if you've gotten a job that allows you to create a monthly budget, which includes paying off your student loans, and you've saved up for a vacation, and you take a vacation and you're paying off your student loans at the prescribed amount, I mean, fine, right? Because usually student loans are at a very low percentage rate, and so it doesn't make any sense to pay them off early.
All right.
And I don't know if that's even an option. We didn't, but maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. But by that standard, which I think is strict, you would say, well, why don't I pay off my student loan first and then take vacations? So maybe I can pay it off early if I do a little bit of savings. I think that doing some modest traveling, and by the way, a weekend trip to Carlsbad can be just as effective as flying to France as far as getting away.
Not the
I
same
didn't
quality
say the
of pastries.
quality of pastries is the same, but I'm just saying you could be creative about how you get away on vacation also. But I think that's fine to do a modest vacation while you're paying off student debts. Now, if you're going to add to your student debts with a ton of credit card debt and you don't have a monthly budget and you can see a plan to pay that off.
Yeah.
That's a different story. But I think that it's funny because I'm sitting here saying, I think that's okay. We've lost long-term thinking in our country in a big way, in my experience. When I'm talking to builder developers now about the possibility of doing, solar and storage at the beginning of a development and planning that in, I kind of get these looks like, that's not my job, and it's, I certainly believe in the energy transition, but I don't need to do anything on my part for it, right? And I think a lot of people are thinking that way these days, and it's unfortunate. But again, if you put the time in to do a plan and a structure, and you've done an analysis, and you're looking at the possible consequences, and you've asked the questions, and it's a little bit of a risk because you can never get to zero risk, then I think go for it. I was just counseling a young couple who was going to get married, pre-marriage counseling, and one was a guardian, one was a nurturer, using that language. And one of the questions I asked them was, when are you going to have kids? Well, and I knew what the answer was going to be with a guardian and a nurturer. It's like, when we've paid off everything and we're ready. Unfortunately, the answer is you're never going to be ready. If you set the bar so high that you never get to do something, I think that would be the other end of it.
Well, I am very curious what the audience has to say. What are the conversations happening around your kitchen table? What are some of these debates that you're having about, do you delay gratification or do you just live it up now? So feel free to send us a message on the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. That goes straight to us by way of email, and we'd love to engage in some dialogue around that. So please don't forget, curiositynotjudgment.com. And we will wish you a fantastic week, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.